You're useless now. Those 3 words from my own daughter hit me harder than losing my business ever could. I sat in my beat-up Honda Civic outside her fancy law firm, staring at the Uber stickers on my windshield, feeling like the world had just collapsed around me. The rain was coming down hard on that Tuesday afternoon in Atlanta, and each drop on my windshield felt like another reminder of how far I'd fallen. If you've ever been called worthless by someone you'd die for, if you've ever felt the sting of being forgotten by the people you sacrificed everything for, settle in, because today's story comes with a bitter taste that eventually turns sweet. And if you love stories about second chances and the unexpected ways life can surprise you, hit that subscribe button for Grandpa's Diaries. I've got plenty more where this came from. 58 years old, and I was starting over as an Uber driver. Me, Robert Williams, who once employed 12 people and built half the custom homes in Buckhead. My hands, which used to sign contracts worth hundreds of thousands, now gripped a steering wheel for 12 hours a day just to make rent on a studio apartment in East Atlanta. The same hands that taught my daughter Sarah how to ride a bike, how to throw a baseball, how to believe in herself when the world told her she couldn't be whatever she wanted. I remember the day I started Williams Construction like it was yesterday. Sarah was just 6 years old, missing her front teeth, and she handed me a drawing of a house with crooked windows and a purple door. "Daddy, will you build this one day?" she asked with that gap-toothed smile. I promised her I would, and 26 years later I kept that promise. Built her dream house right in Roswell, complete with the purple front door, just like in her drawing. But dreams don't pay bills when the economy crashes. The pandemic hit my business like a wrecking ball, and one by one my contracts disappeared. The bank called in my loans, my crew had to find work elsewhere, and my life's work crumbled faster than a house built on sand. I fought to keep it together for 2 years, burning through my savings, selling everything I owned, including the watch my father gave me when I graduated high school. The worst part wasn't losing the business. It was watching my daughter's face change when she realized her successful contractor father had become just another struggling black man in America, invisible to a world that only valued what you could produce. The same society that had celebrated my success story was quick to forget my name when the money dried up. But I thought family was different. I thought blood was thicker than financial statements. Sarah had always been my pride and joy. My reason for working 16-hour days and missing sleep to make sure she had every opportunity I never had. Harvard Law School, her own practice, a house in the suburbs, everything I'd dreamed of giving her. But somewhere between her success and my failure, she'd learned to measure love by the weight of a bank account. And mine was empty. Before the words, "You're useless now," changed everything between us, Sarah used to call me her hero. I remember those Saturday mornings when she was little, how she'd wake up at dawn just to ride to construction sites with me. She'd wear her little pink hard hat and carry around a toy hammer, pretending to inspect my work. "Daddy, is this level?" she'd ask, squinting at a perfectly straight wall with all the seriousness of a seasoned contractor. Those were the days when my truck was new, and my business card still smelled like fresh ink. Williams Construction was just getting started, but Sarah believed I could build the world if I wanted to. She'd introduce me to her friends as the man who builds houses where families live happily ever after. Her teacher once told me that Sarah had written an essay titled, "My Dad, the Dream Builder." I kept that essay folded in my wallet for 15 years, until the paper started falling apart. Sunday dinners at our old house in College Park were sacred. I'd spend hours in the kitchen making my grandmother's fried chicken recipe, while Sarah did homework at the kitchen table. She'd ask me about my day, genuinely interested in every detail about foundation pours and electrical installations. "When I grow up, I want to build houses too," she'd say between bites of cornbread. But I had bigger dreams for her. "Baby girl, you're going to build something even better, a career that nobody can take away from you." I worked double shifts so she could attend private school, saved every penny for her college fund while driving a truck with 200,000 miles on it. When her classmates' parents drove luxury cars to school events, I'd park my work truck around the corner so Sarah wouldn't feel embarrassed. She never asked me to, but I saw how she looked at those BMWs and Mercedes in the parking lot. I wanted to give her that life, that confidence that comes with never having to worry about money. The proudest day of my life was when Sarah graduated from Harvard Law School. I drove 16 hours straight to Boston, wearing the only suit I owned, watching my baby girl walk across that stage. She found me in the crowd afterward, tears streaming down both our faces. "I did it, Daddy," she whispered. "We did it," I corrected her, because every late night I'd spent working was worth that moment. She was everything I'd dreamed she could become. But success has a way of changing people, and I started noticing small shifts in Sarah's behavior during her 3rd year of law school. Phone calls became shorter, visits home less frequent. When she talked about her internship at prestigious firms, I heard less about the work and more about the networking events, the expensive restaurants, the world she was entering that I'd never be part of. I told myself it was natural. She was growing up, finding her place in the world. The first crack in our relationship came when she started dating Marcus, a fellow lawyer whose family owned half of Buckhead. When she brought him home for Christmas, I overheard him asking her why she'd grown up in this neighborhood. Sarah's response still echoes in my mind. Dad worked really hard to give us what he could. Not what we deserved, not what we earned together, what he could manage. Like my love and sacrifice had been barely adequate. The first time Sarah showed me who she was becoming was at her engagement party 3 years ago. I'd saved up for months to buy her a decent gift, settling on a beautiful necklace from a jewelry store downtown. Nothing fancy, but it was real gold with a small diamond pendant, the kind of piece my mother would have treasured forever. When Sarah opened it in front of her law school friends and Marcus's family, her smile felt forced, polite, but distant. Later that evening, I found the necklace box tucked behind some expensive gifts on the table, forgotten like an afterthought. Marcus's mother had given Sarah diamond earrings worth more than I made in 3 months. I watched my daughter fawn over those earrings, posting pictures on social media, while my gift sat unopened in its modest velvet box. That night, I realized my little girl was learning to measure love by its price tag. The construction business was already struggling by then, but I hadn't told Sarah yet. I didn't want to burden her during such a happy time in her life. When she mentioned wanting to have the wedding at the Ritz-Carlton, I just nodded and smiled, even though the cost would have bankrupted me. "Don't worry about money, Daddy," she said, patting my shoulder. "Marcus's family is handling most of it. You just need to cover the rehearsal dinner." "Just $20,000, she said it like it was pocket change. Phone calls became business transactions. "Dad, I need you to call in a favor with your electrical guy for Marcus's office renovation." "Dad, do you know any contractors who work cheap? My friend needs some work done." I became a resource to be tapped, not a father to be cherished. When I'd try to steer conversations toward how she was doing, really doing, she'd pivot to work stress or wedding planning. The woman who used to tell me everything was becoming a stranger. The wedding day arrived, and I walked Sarah down the aisle wearing a rented tuxedo that didn't quite fit. She looked beautiful, radiant even, but when she took Marcus's arm, I felt like I was handing her over to a world that would erase every trace of where she came from. During his wedding speech, Marcus thanked Sarah's family for raising such an incredible woman, but his eyes never met mine. I was acknowledged in the plural, invisible in the singular. After the wedding, Sarah moved to Marcus's world completely. Their house in Roswell, the one with the purple door I'd built for her, became a showpiece for entertaining Marcus's colleagues. When I'd visit, I felt like a guest in the home I'd constructed with my own hands. Sarah would give me tours like I'd never seen the place before, pointing out new furniture and artwork while I nodded politely at rooms I'd framed and floors I'd installed. The final warning sign came 6 months ago, before my business completely collapsed. I'd called Sarah to tell her about losing my biggest contract, hoping for some comfort, maybe some advice from my lawyer daughter about how to handle the legal aspects of my failing business. Instead, she sighed heavily into the phone and said, "Dad, I'm really busy with a case right now. Can we talk about this later?" Later never came. She was too busy building her new life to notice her father's was falling apart. The day I told Sarah about the bankruptcy was the day everything died between us. I'd been driving for Uber for 3 months by then, trying to scrape together enough money to avoid losing my apartment. My hands were stiff from gripping the steering wheel. My back ached from sitting in traffic, and my pride had been ground down to nothing. But I still thought my daughter would care that her father was drowning. I drove to her law firm that rainy Tuesday afternoon, the same Honda Civic that now served as my mobile office. The building was all glass and steel, reaching toward the sky like a monument to success I'd never touch again. The security guard looked at me like I didn't belong there, checking his list twice before reluctantly calling Sarah's office. "Tell her it's her father," I said, and his expression softened slightly, like he suddenly understood why a man my age was standing in the lobby looking lost. Sarah came down 15 minutes later, wearing a suit that cost more than I made in a week of driving. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, every inch the successful attorney she'd become. But when she saw me, something cold flickered across her face. Embarrassment maybe, or frustration that I'd shown up at her workplace looking like exactly what I was, a broken-down man in work clothes. "Dad, what are you doing here?" she asked, glancing around to see if any of her colleagues were watching. We sat in the lobby, surrounded by marble and success, while I tried to find the words to tell my daughter that everything she'd grown up believing about her father was gone. The business was finished, the house was in foreclosure, and I was barely surviving on Uber earnings and whatever odd jobs I could pick up. I watched her face change as I talked, watched the daughter who used to hang on my every word transform into a stranger, calculating the social cost of having a failed father. When I finished explaining, she was quiet for a long moment, staring at the floor like she was trying to solve a complicated legal problem. Finally, she looked up at me with eyes I didn't recognize. "You're useless now," she said, and those 3 words landed like physical blows. Not, "I'm sorry this happened," or "How can I help?" or even, "Everything will be okay." Just a cold assessment of my worth based on my bank account. She continued, her voice taking on the same tone she probably used with difficult clients. "I can't have this affecting my reputation, Dad. Marcus is up for partner and we can't have people knowing." I sat there in that marble lobby, listening to my daughter explain why her broke father was now a liability to be managed rather than a parent to be loved. She offered me money, not out of love, but like hush money to keep me quiet and distant. "Take this. Get yourself cleaned up. Find something stable. But please, don't just show up at my office anymore." She handed me an envelope with $500 inside, a tip for services rendered over 26 years of being her father. Walking back to my car that day, I felt something break inside me that I knew would never heal. The rain was still coming down, mixing with tears I hadn't shed since my father died. I sat in my Honda Civic with its Uber stickers and cracked dashboard, holding that envelope of pity money, realizing that I'd raised a stranger who happened to share my DNA. The little girl who used to call me her hero had grown up to call me useless. After that day at Sarah's office, I disappeared into the invisible world of gig work and studio apartment living. My new place in East Atlanta was a far cry from the house I'd built in College Park. 400 square feet of borrowed space where the walls were thin enough to hear every argument, every late-night television show, every reminder that other people still had normal lives. I kept the purple door from Sarah's childhood home, the one I'd custom-made to match her crayon drawing, leaning against the wall like a monument to better times. The Uber routine became my escape from thinking too much. Wake up at 5 a.m., shower in a bathroom so small I had to step into the hallway to towel off, grab a gas station coffee, and start driving. Atlanta traffic became my meditation, the constant flow of strangers needing rides to places more important than anywhere I had to go. Most passengers barely acknowledged my existence, which suited me fine. I'd become a ghost driving other people toward their dreams. Some nights I'd sit in my car after my last ride, parked outside Sarah's old elementary school or the playground where I used to push her on the swings. The silence felt safer than going home to that empty studio, where the purple door would remind me of promises I'd kept and love I'd apparently wasted. I started carrying around an old photo of Sarah as a little girl, the one where she's wearing her pink hard hat and grinning like she just discovered the secret to building castles out of dreams. The other drivers at the airport pickup area became my only social contact, though we rarely talked about personal stuff. There was Marcus, a laid-off airline mechanic who drove nights to pay for his daughter's diabetes medication. There was Jennifer, a retired teacher whose pension wasn't enough to cover her mother's nursing home. We were all ghosts, invisible people keeping the city moving while our own lives stood still. Nobody asked about my past, and I didn't volunteer the story of how I'd gone from business owner to background character in other people's stories. I stopped checking social media after seeing Sarah's posts about her promotion to senior partner, her vacation photos from Europe, her perfect life that no longer included space for an imperfect father. The comments from her law school friends were all congratulations and heart emojis, celebrating a success story that had edited out its foundation. I wondered if she ever thought about the man who'd worked 16-hour days to make her dreams possible, or if I'd been permanently deleted from the narrative of her life. The worst moments came during family pickup times, school dismissal, weekend soccer games, birthday parties. I'd watch fathers hugging their children, loading car seats, making plans for ice cream, and feel like I was looking through windows into a world I'd been exiled from. One afternoon, I picked up a man from the airport whose daughter had flown in to surprise him for Father's Day. Listening to his joy, his excitement about showing her around the city, I had to pull over after dropping him off to compose myself. My phone sat silent most days. No calls from Sarah, no texts asking how I was doing. The only contact was an occasional transfer of money to my account. Guilt payments, I figured, to keep her conscience clean. I never spent that money on anything but the most basic necessities, treating it like evidence of what our relationship had become. Financial transactions instead of family connections. Every deposit felt like another confirmation that I'd been reduced to a problem to be managed from a distance. It was a Thursday evening in late November when everything changed, though I didn't know it at the time. I just finished a long day of driving, my back aching and my spirit somewhere around my ankles, when I got a pickup request from Piedmont Hospital. Usually hospital pickups were quick, quiet affairs, people too tired or emotional for conversation. But when Frank Williams shuffled into my back seat, clutching a small brown bag and moving like every step was a negotiation with gravity, something felt different. Frank was 78 years old, thin as a rail, with hands that shook slightly but eyes that still held fire. He was headed to a modest apartment complex in Virginia Highland, and normally that would have been a silent 15-minute ride. But Frank started talking immediately, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd lived through decades of stories worth telling. "You know, son, I've been riding in these Ubers for 2 years now, ever since I gave up driving. Most drivers act like I'm invisible." Halfway through the ride, Frank opened his brown bag and pulled out a small container of chocolate pudding, the kind they serve in hospital cafeterias. "You hungry?" he asked, and I almost laughed because who shares pudding with their Uber driver? But something in his tone stopped me. This wasn't pity or charity. This was an old man who understood what it meant to be forgotten by the world, reaching out to someone else who'd been pushed to the margins. I pulled into a gas station parking lot and turned around to face Frank properly. That's when I noticed his hospital bracelet, the way his clothes hung loose like he'd recently lost weight, the careful way he moved like his body was betraying him. We sat there in my beat-up Honda, two black men separated by 20 years and connected by the understanding that sometimes the world decides you don't matter anymore. We shared that pudding with plastic spoons from my glove compartment, and it tasted better than any meal I'd eaten in months. Frank told me about his late wife Martha, how they'd run a small bakery in Sweet Auburn for 40 years until gentrification pushed them out. He told me about his daughter who lived in California and called once a month, about his grandchildren who sent birthday cards but never visited. "People think when you get old you stop having dreams," he said, licking chocolate from his spoon. "But I still dream about opening another bakery. Small place, nothing fancy. Just somewhere people could come and remember what homemade tastes like." As we talked, Frank mentioned his granddaughter Jessica, who'd recently moved back to Atlanta to start her own food consulting business. She was struggling to find authentic local vendors for her clients, people who understood Southern food traditions, who could bring real flavor to the corporate catering contracts she was landing. "She keeps saying she needs to find someone who understands both the business side and the heart side of food," Frank said, his eyes lighting up like he'd just solved a puzzle. When I dropped Frank off at his apartment, he pressed a business card into my hand. Not his granddaughter's, but one he'd made himself at FedEx office. "Frank Williams, consultant," it read, with his phone number written in careful handwriting. "Call me tomorrow," he said, climbing slowly out of my car. "I've got an idea about those dreams you think died with your business." I drove away thinking that old man didn't know anything about my dreams, but I kept his card anyway, tucked behind the photo of Sarah in my wallet. 6 months later, I was standing in my own commercial kitchen, watching Jessica Williams put the finishing touches on our presentation for the city's biggest catering contract. Frank had been right about dreams not dying. They just sometimes need the right person to help you remember where you buried them. Williams and Williams Southern Catering had grown from a conversation over hospital pudding into a business that employed 15 people, and served everyone from tech startups to wedding receptions across Atlanta. Frank's granddaughter turned out to be everything he'd promised and more. Jessica had the business connections and marketing expertise, while I brought decades of project management skills and a deep understanding of what it meant to build something from nothing. Together, we created a catering company that specialized in authentic Southern cuisine with a modern twist, honoring tradition while embracing innovation. Frank became our head recipe consultant, finally getting his dream bakery, just inside our commercial kitchen instead of on a street corner. The day we got that city contract, the one worth more than I'd made in my best year of construction, I found myself thinking about Sarah for the first time in weeks. Not with anger or sadness, but with a strange kind of peace. I'd spent so many years defining my worth through her success, measuring my value by her opinion of me, that I'd forgotten who I was before I became her father. This new business, this unexpected second chapter of my life, belonged entirely to me. Jessica insisted on celebrating at one of Atlanta's upscale restaurants, the kind of place where Sarah probably took her law firm clients. I felt awkward in my one good suit, surrounded by crystal glasses and cloth napkins. But Frank was in his element, telling stories about the old days and making our waiter laugh until his sides hurt. "Success tastes different when you earn it the second time," Frank said, raising his glass of sweet tea. "It's got more flavor because you know how precious it is." 3 weeks later, my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in almost a year. Sarah's voice sounded different, smaller somehow, when she said, "Dad, I heard about your business. I saw the article in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution." The article had featured Jessica, Frank, and me as examples of multi-generational entrepreneurship, with a photo of us standing in front of our kitchen. Sarah's voice cracked slightly when she said, "I had no idea I thought you were still driving for Uber." I let her talk, listened to her stumble through an apology that felt more like surprise than genuine remorse. She'd called because she'd seen my success, not because she'd missed her father. When she asked if we could have dinner to catch up, I told her I'd think about it. For the first time in our relationship, I wasn't rushing to make her happy or fix what was broken between us. I had my own life now, my own source of pride and purpose. I never did call Sarah back, but I heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd left Marcus and moved back to a smaller place in town. Apparently, partnership at the law firm hadn't brought the happiness she'd expected, and marriage to status hadn't filled whatever emptiness she was carrying. I felt sorry for her, but I didn't feel responsible for fixing it. Some lessons can only be learned alone, and I'd finally learned mine. You can't build your worth on someone else's foundation, not even your own child's. Tell me in the comments below, have you ever been written off by someone who should have stood by you? Have you ever discovered that your real strength was hiding underneath the rubble of your old life? Drop a comment and let me know your story. And don't forget to subscribe to Grandpa's Diaries. I've got plenty more tales about second chances, unexpected friendships, and the sweet taste of building something beautiful from the pieces of something broken.